All right, it is 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the first day of the Peralta Online Equity Conference. My name is Inger Stark and I'm an equity team meeting, and I'm here to launch a session today that we are very grateful for our sponsors. We only have a few, Ally is one of them. We're very grateful for their investment in supporting this equity conference. So the title of the session is Equitable Practices with Ally, and a couple of logistics. I will keep an eye on the chat session for questions and support the Sam, our leader, and perhaps flag her attention if she needs it. Also, I just do want to remind you that the session is being recorded, and we will edit the recordings and make them available to all conference registrants. We have not today yet, as far as I know, had any Zoom bombers, but if we do, I apologize in advance. We decided to leave the Zoom links relatively open and public because we had such a large number of people register. And then I just would like to, although I don't know you, Sam, very well, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself and take it from there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Inger, and thank you all for joining today. My name is Sam Carroll, and I'm Blackboard's accessibility strategist. And in that role, I partner with colleges, universities, and campus systems really around the world to help provide some support and strategies for creating more accessible and inclusive learning environments. With this work, I also analyze global institutional trends when it comes to accessibility. So for today, I want to talk a little bit about some equitable practices using Ally, as well as some of the global accessibility trends that we are seeing with its use, and really focusing this on how to foster more access and equity in the learning environment. So really specifically, we'll talk a little bit about what's going on right now with accessibility in higher education, certainly with COVID-19 and just that shift to remote or virtual learning environments. There's a lot happening. So before we talk about Ally, I do want to take a step back and talk a little bit more about some of the themes and trends that we're seeing with accessibility in the higher education landscape. And then from there, let's talk a little bit about what Ally is and how it functions in the learning management system, specifically how it provides support to instructors and students in creating more accessible courses and content. And then I have a couple of resources that I'll also share with you to help get started using Ally or creating more inclusive courses. So again, let's talk a little bit about what's going on with access in higher education and why accessibility has become such an important topic when we think about the equity and inclusion of all of our learners. So when it comes to providing accessibility, we typically see institutions take one of two approaches to addressing barriers in the learning environment. The first approach is up there on the left, and this approach is very rooted in supporting one learner at a time, often through a one-to-one accommodation model in which a student with a disability maybe identifies that they have a need for access, and then that need gets met, usually through an accommodation for a specific course in a specific term. In the United States, a lot of times this approach is very rooted in compliance and some of the legal obligations to ensure that students with disabilities have equitable access in the academic setting. This one-to-one approach can sometimes, not always, but sometimes be a little bit reactive, in which we're addressing those barriers to equity retroactively instead of trying to account for access as much as possible as our courses or content are really being built. So the other approach that we see institutions take, and I think is getting a lot more consideration coming out of COVID-19, is to really think about accessibility and equity by focusing on all learners in that academic setting. So this kind of focus on supporting the all is very much rooted in inclusive course design and universal design for learning, and is really trying to account for all learners and their differences, needs, backgrounds, abilities, even the cultures that they're bringing to the learning environment as courses and content are being created. So really this model tries to really think about or frame access as a proactive process instead of a reactive process, where we can really think about equity and removing some of those barriers for students before they even know they exist and bring them to our attention. While I think that the accommodation model will always in some capacity be needed, really my hope is that institutions can think a little bit more about this proactive approach to equity and really think about how access can be used to support all learners in that setting. And when we talk about different types of learners, there are, I think, some populations of students that we are seeing increasingly represented in our courses. Certainly our classrooms are really full of diverse learners, but there are a couple of populations that we are seeing grow. In particular, students with disabilities is very much a growing population. And this can refer to students that have visible disabilities, invisible disabilities, or even temporary disabilities. When we talk about learners with visible disabilities, we're talking about students that are maybe blind or have a mobility disability, maybe a deaf student. A lot of times our students with visible disabilities are receiving kind of those formal accommodations through a disability services office. For example, a student who uses a wheelchair may receive an audio version of their course content or textbooks, as they might have challenges kind of picking up or holding a heavy textbook. We're also again seeing a lot of learners with invisible disabilities. These are disabilities that, as the name suggests, are not always visually apparent. A couple of examples of invisible disabilities are dyslexia, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, depression, anxiety, traumatic brain injury, and so on. And it's very likely that your students with invisible disabilities are eligible for accommodations, but very frequently do not seek them out, whether that's because of a stigma attached to self-disclosing that disability, or maybe even a barrier to getting a diagnosis in the first place. We also have students with temporary disabilities. Maybe they've experienced an accident or illness and now are needing perhaps a change in their environment to really kind of get access into it in ways that are perhaps different than they did before. Beyond disability, we are also seeing a very steady increase in what has historically been called our non-traditional students. This one for me is a pretty broad category. It refers to a lot of different characteristics. When we talk about non-traditional learners, we could be talking about perhaps an older student who's returning to school after time away, maybe a student working a job or taking care of families or children at home, more of that part-time learner. We could be talking about international students coming to our institutions from other countries, or maybe even first-generation learners that are the first in their family to seek out or attain higher education. I would actually make the argument that most of our students at this point have at least one kind of quote unquote non-traditional characteristic. And our non-traditional learners really at this point are who we are seeing most represented in the classroom. And even device need plays a facet into diversity. I think this one for me is really interesting coming out of COVID-19 and that move to remote or online instruction. A lot of students we're talking to are, whether it's out of need or preference, really relying on things like cell phones or mobile devices to engage with content. And not a lot of content was actually designed to be usable on that type of device. And because all of our students are very unique and diverse, it does mean that some of the access barriers that we see prevalently in the learning environment really can impact everyone. I think a really great example of an access barrier that a lot of students share can impede their ability to kind of equitably engage with their course or content is a scanned PDF. So I have an image of a scanned PDF up on the screen there, and it's a document that we see pretty often. Usually you'll come across it when maybe someone's taken a journal or an article and they photocopied it and uploaded it into a course. The issue with scanned PDFs is that they're not actually a text-based document, they're actually just a picture of that text. So if you have a student in your course who is maybe blind or has low vision and is relying on assistive technology like a screen reader, if they get a scanned PDF like the one up on the screen, it's going to be a pretty hard stop barrier. There's actually no text in that document for that screen reader to read out to that student, meaning they're not going to be able to engage with it at all. Beyond that, scanned PDFs are not particularly usable types of content. If you kind of zoom in a little bit on the example I have up there, you will see that the font is a little bit blurry, the margins are cut off, the text is crooked, you've got those kind of lines or gutters down the middle of the screen. And a lot of times students report that having features like that, kind of those usability features, can really impede their ability to engage with content. And interestingly enough, there's been some great recent research that really does demonstrate that usability and accessibility can impact engagement. It's a study done in 2017 that had users that were disabled and users that did not identify as being disabled engage with both accessible and non-accessible websites. And this study found that by far, both groups of users were able to much more effectively engage with, retain information from, and complete tasks more quickly when interacting with more accessible websites and content. And when we look at that scanned PDF, we can really see how that's the case. And this is where I think Ally comes in. Ally really is a tool that is trying to provide support to students, faculty, and institutions as a whole when it comes to creating more accessible and equitable environments. So let's talk a little bit about what Ally is and how it's trying to promote equity. So Ally has really kind of three main features or pillars. The first pillar of Ally is really what's meant to be student facing, and those are alternative formats. Ally is going to take content that has been brought into or created in learning management systems, and it's going to automatically generate a variety of alternatives to that original content item and make them available to students. A couple of examples of alternative formats are a mobile-friendly HTML version of course content or an audio MP3 version of content that students can listen to. And really the goal of those different formats is to provide students some flexibility and choice for how they might engage with content in ways that really do meet their preferences, needs, abilities, maybe even the devices that they're using to engage with that environment in the first place. The second pillar of Ally is meant to be faculty or instructor facing, and that is instructor feedback. Ally is going to provide instructors some real-time and contextual guidance about barriers that might be present in courses and content. It's going to highlight the impact of those barriers to different types of learners in a course. And then lastly, Ally does provide some pretty robust guidance to instructors and content creators on how to, when possible, go back into that source file and fix those barriers so that they are no longer present for students. And then the third component of Ally is an institutional report. This is a report that's really available to LMS administrators, and it just gives them a pretty detailed understanding about the state of accessibility within the LMS, and will highlight things like where frequent or severe barriers to access are present. Really, the goal of that report is to help administrators kind of understand that accessibility landscape, to do things like understand trends or set benchmarks or goals to track progress over time. So let's talk a little bit about how Ally works and what faculty and students are going to experience if it is available in a course. Really big goal of Ally is to not change the way that students or instructors are really engaging within the learning environment. If Ally is enabled in a course, that instructor of that course is going to go in and they're going to add or create or change content within that course as they would in really any other situation. With Ally being enabled, it's going to take that content and behind the scenes, it's really going to do two things to it. And these two processes are not visually apparent to students or faculty, nor is there anything that the instructor needs to do to generate this. But the first thing that Ally will do is it will take content and it will compare it to an accessibility checklist and assign that content item a score based on how frequent or severe barriers might be in that particular item. The other thing that Ally is doing behind the scenes is it's taking that content and it's running it through some machine learning algorithms to really try and extract the semantic or structural makeup of that document. And Ally is doing that for two reasons. The first is that semantic makeup does become the basis for the alternative formats it goes on to generate. The other reason Ally is doing that is, as much as possible, we do want to give instructors feedback about not just what their barriers are within content, but also where some of those barriers might be present within a document. But what will be automatically available in courses with Ally, starting with the student function, are alternative formats. So these alternative formats, while primarily intended for learners, are also made available to instructors. But with these alternative formats, students will see an icon show up next to supported content. And if they select that icon, they get a menu of options very similar to what you're seeing up on the screen that include things like a tagged or OCR PDF, a mobile-friendly HTML version, things like EPUB for flexibility and customizing text within a document. There's an audio alternative format for students to listen to, and so on. So students get a lot of different options, and it's really up to them to decide which option they would like to engage with. And really, again, the benefits of these different alternative formats is that they're really trying to support some of your learner needs, preferences, abilities, and even devices without really interrupting too much how students are interacting or engaging with that course in the first place. The other thing that Ally makes available is that instructor feedback. And really the goal of instructor feedback, again, is to provide faculty some real-time and contextual guidance about the barriers to equity and access that might be present in their courses and how to fix those barriers so that they are no longer present for learners. And really the benefits of that feedback is that faculty can get some education and awareness about accessibility best practices. I would say a long-term goal of the instructor feedback is to really support faculty in more proactively creating accessible content going forward. If faculty get some feedback about things like their images not having image descriptions, our hope is that when faculty go to create new content, that they will kind of incorporate those image descriptions or accessibility features into their content from the outset. Ally has also had a pretty significant impact to learning across the United States. In the years 2019 to 2020, so really kind of prior to or leading up to the pandemic, we saw over 9 million alternative format downloads in just 1 year, and the engagement with our alternative formats has only increased substantially since then. So we are finding that students are getting a lot of value out of those different formats. We are also finding that more and more faculty and instructors are going back and engaging with that feedback to make really meaningful fixes to their content. So with that in mind, I know we are coming to kind of the top of the time we have together. I did want to share just a couple of additional resources with you as you think about Ally and particularly how to create more access and equity with it. We do have a really fantastic user community. If anyone is more than welcome to sign up to that group. We meet on a regular basis and we have just a really active user forum. So I have the link there. We also have a free COVID-19 file transformer. If you do have an institution that does not have Ally, we are trying to make some of the student-facing features, particularly those alternative formats, available to everyone. And then we also have some supporting materials available as well. So again, let me put those links in the chat there, and then I will open it up to questions.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sam. Sorry, my bad that I thought it was 20. We have time.
Oh, I thought it was 22. I think that's what the
Yeah.
Well, I'm Kristen with Innovative Educators, and I'm supposed to be talking at bear with me, guys. Different time zone at 25 after in 3 minutes.
Okay. Okay.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Okay. We're all on the same page then. Perfect.
How about, so before we make that shift, and Kristen, thank you for pointing that out because that's actually not super clear on the webpage. So before we make that shift, is there anyone who would like to, besides me, who would like to ask questions of Sam related specifically to ally user, stuff like that? Questions. And I think we're a small enough group that in addition to putting them in the chat box, we could just go ahead, people could ask.
Yeah, please come on the mic or put your thoughts in the chat there. I will also add my email to the chat as well. So if you do think of something later, please don't hesitate to reach out to.
So, yeah, I would like, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, before we shift gears, and Kristen, we've only got a couple more minutes. I wondered if one or both of you could just really briefly address how institutions, so the folks that are here who are thinking, okay, how do I take, besides sharing this video with folks at my institutions, assuming institutions have Ally, what could they do? So for me, obviously, I'm the professional development coordinator. What would be our step to engage you more, to reach out to you? Should we just connect with you via email? How do we help our colleagues use Ally more that supports student learning?
Yeah, it's a really great question. We actually have a variety of resources and services that are really focused specifically on helping institutions not just deploy Ally, but adopt it and use it to the most of their kind of ability. So one of the links I did put in the chat there is our communication and adoption toolkit that has some, I think, really great getting started resources around things like the alternative formats, their uses and benefits, and then some of the faculty or instructor facing components of Ally. As an accessibility strategist, I also, part of my job is to offer strategic consulting services to institutions around either deploying Ally and starting to make it available in courses, or really wanting to think about long-term adoption of it and things like, how do I use institutional report data to set benchmarks and track goals, or how do I ensure that faculty and instructors are really set up for success in their use of it, and so on. If you are an institution that maybe is just starting off in your Ally journey, I think just a couple of best practices I will offer. The first being really encourage students to use those alternative formats. We have found that a lot of times students don't always notice that they're there, and don't always understand things like what HTML is unless they receive really intentional communication about it. And as I shared, so many of those students are using those alternative formats, and the feedback around them has been so positive that I think it would be a really missed opportunity if we as institutions did not really just take the time to let students know that they are available to support their learning. The other, I think, kind of best practice I'll give for institutions that are just kind of starting off with their Ally journey, and this one I think is really specific to instructors, and that is to really think about accessibility and equity as progress and not perfection. And what I mean by that is Ally is going to do just such a great job of highlighting some of those barriers in your courses and content. Our hope is not that you go in and fix everything all at once. That is not probably going to be a very sustainable approach. What I would recommend is to really take the time to engage with that feedback and to start making some small steps to improve the future, or improve your content going forward into the future. So hopefully that was helpful, Inger.
It was actually I'm glad you said that for the people who may watch this recording later too. That's super helpful. Love the, progress, not perfection. We use that with folks who are trying to revise their own courses to meet the Peralta Online Equity rubric, because actually there never is perfection, because just when you think you're close, everything changes in technology, the students change, everything changes. So okay, so let me thank you so much, Sam and Stephanie, for coming from Ally. Let me say again, for those of you who are here and may watch the recording later, that Ally was a generous sponsor for this, this conference. This is a first ever conference, and we had very little support. And a couple of little organizations came in, actually large organizations came in to help us. Another one is the Innovative Educators. And so we thank you very graciously for being a sponsor of the project. And Kristen, since I have not yet met you, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and I will make you a host in case you would like to share your screen.
I would love to. Okay, here we are. I am Kristen, and I have the pleasure of being the Partner Relations Director at Innovative Educators. And we've been around for 15 years. We're owned and founded by women, two women that met at the community college system here in Colorado. And we developed our company out of like requests versus, so we're not an enterprise software. We're not Blackboard. We come in with kind of a pedagogical view with content and really in a nuanced way, provide content to our clients. And they often, will push the content through an LMS, but then, we have a variety of ways of integration, but we absolutely also adhere to high accessibility standards. So we have VPATs, HECVACs, everything we put through our system, which functions like a mini LMS, is ADA, and we have the support tools and have, accessibility people on staff. And so everything we do comes out that way. And we did, for those that are in California, great news. We signed an agreement with the California Community College System. So anybody who's in California gets a special deal. So you can just, email me. But we essentially have services that touch on the different stakeholder groups on campus. So we actually do professional development webinars for staff and faculty, and we have those rolling on an ongoing basis here in our live webinar calendar. And some are free. They're coming up. I have low bandwidth in the mountains where I live. Some of them are free. Friday Fives are always free. These ones are not free, but the institution would purchase it and then make it available live, and then you get the recording for a year. So we, do all of that. And so that's our professional development. Then you head on over to student success solutions. And to be honest, in my opinion, our biggest jam really is student lingo. These are our soft skill modules, and I hate calling them soft skills because they're not really soft. You have to know these things in order to be successful in life. And these are things that schools cover typically. And so, pre-COVID, the community colleges really understood that it's okay to provide baseline quality information in an online format because you're front loading or preloading the learner with, the information that is quality. And then you can come in at the institutional level and really make sure that it's focused on the institution or from the pedagogical standpoint. So that's who we are. And so if you're interested in anything that we do, just head on over to Innovative Educators and you can dive in. And then we leverage a platform that functions like I mentioned, like a mini LMS. And so there's each learner has their own dashboard. Let me move my Zoom bar. Oh my gosh, it's a Zoom day. Sorry, guys. Oh my gosh, it's seriously been quite a bear. So you can see that learners can view their progress. If I can move my Zoom bar around here, which is cool. And they can bookmark items of interest, get certificates of completion. And we do all the coursework for the institution, but we do as little or as much as the institution wants us to do for them. So that's what, and we talk a lot about how to get into Blackboard. We do a lot of videos, screencasts and things within our orientations that, show students how to get into Blackboard, because sometimes they might already have a Blackboard account, sometimes they don't. So, just depending on the use case of the client and the product that they're using, that's really the nuance. So that's us in a nutshell. And I'll put into the Zoom room just our main website. Whoopsies. If I could, the Zoom bar is killing me today. And then I've lost our own website. That's okay. I'm going to put our main website in the Zoom room because hopefully everything can be found circularly on our website. And I am Kristen. And if you go down to our About Us section, I just think this is so cute. You'll find that we also love animals. And we have our pet ambassadors here. So just going to throw it out there that in times of COVID, let's laugh a little, have a little grace. have some, like, as much fun as we possibly can with our potentially little ones at home, and just the life being where it is. But what was great was when COVID hit, we already had, all of our accessibility like dialed in. So it wasn't a problem for us. It was just more like actually educating the clients that came to us, which I thought was interesting, but that's okay. So that's who we are. And I just wanted to thank you, the conference, and Kevin, and everybody for giving us the opportunity to have this quick chat. So thank you.
May I ask a couple of questions, Kristen? And do you have enough time in case anyone
Yes.
else here has questions?
Yes.
So again, because we're a small group, if anybody else who's here has questions, and if not, I have a couple.
Okay.
And I realize we're a small group, but I want to be really clear because I do believe lots of people are going to circle back and watch these videos afterwards, because we, as I said, had huge registration. So
Yes.
just to clarify, people can go to the URL to your main webpage, learn lots about you guys, what you do. And there are some resources that are available, even if an institution isn't a subscription institution, correct?
Yes. 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 So head on over to our free training. Yes, ma'am. And these are legitimate webinars. I mean, they do probably touch a little bit on our products. Our Friday 5 really doesn't. That's like a blog, like a live blog. And it's just a chat with people from higher ed. So thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate that. I forgot that. Thank
And
you.
then in addition, I think I heard you say that you recently negotiated with California Community College Systems so that institutions who are interested either get some sort of a discount or can connect via the large system to you guys as well.
Correct. Yes.
Great.
And so we've got some pricing here. It's a hidden web page, but it's not like it's a secret, because you could go find a contract anywhere. But the contract was like 27 million pages long. So we put it on a web page that I could more easily display to people. So yeah. And then we also do free trials for all of our products. So if you head on over to Student Lingo, if I can get myself out of here. Oopsies. Then you head on over to Student Lingo, and we always have a free trial. And so, because when you work in higher ed, you have to, the people using the service have to feel comfortable. As you know, everybody here is a teacher or service provider. So we have to make sure everything is quality. And so with Student Lingo, for example, it's not me providing the content. It's people like Dr. Sandra McGuire, Dr. Lori Hazard, people that are like essentially like national experts coming into your college. And each workshop for Student Lingo is just that right amount of time to be, not for the student not to like drop off and like you lose it, and it's chunked. And so we follow best practices for online learning from OLC and the quality matters rubrics.
Excellent. Let me see. And so I see that you put, people can either get a hold of you via the website, or I see you put your email. Did you put your email address in there? Someone's in the chat. That would be
Thank you for
also, because there it is. Great. Does anybody else have any questions? This has been super helpful. I knew about Ally. I did not know about the innovative.
Me too. I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, this is great.
It is.
A lot.
Let me also thank Molly, or the kitty cat picture person, Molly, for assisting with captioning for us today, making our resources available in all ways to all people is very important, with a commitment to equity. Carl, I see you there, but you haven't said anything. Would you like to say anything before we sign off?
This has been fantastic. Thank you. I've learned a little bit about Ally previously, but it's great to know all the additional resources. Really appreciate this session.
Yeah.
Terrific. Great. Okay. Well, so thank you so much, everybody. And again, double extra thanks to our sponsors who helped make today possible, and tomorrow and the next day. And we'll see you in one of the subsequent sessions, hopefully.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.